Good morning. Today is Thursday, July 30th. In these crazy times in which we live, these times of chaos and troubles, we need to know that God provides for us. It's not necessarily what we want, but He will provide what we need. Let me tell you a story. We find it in Genesis chapter 22. Abraham had waited for years to be blessed with a son, long past the time that he and Sarah should have been able to have children. Suddenly, there was this promise of a coming son. And even more, Abraham was promised by God Himself that he would be the father of a great nation with many descendants. But then, even after the promise had been made, they waited for years before that son would actually be born. And then finally, there was Isaac. Isaac was born to them at a time that seemed impossible. But as with all babies, he was pure blessing, pure happiness. But in this case, it was even more. It was a blessing beyond what anybody could have imagined. It was a relief for Sarah from the shame that she had of her barrenness. That was an issue in those days that was very critical. And certainly this was recognized as a miracle by all those who were observing. But then came the day that God instructed Abraham to take his son, his beloved son, and offer him as a sacrifice on the altar. This was unthinkable, unbelievable, even in Abraham's mind, unkind. How can God do this? Abraham was confronted with an impossible choice. Either he would kill his son or he would disobey God. I believe we can understand that during those days Abraham was in torment. He couldn't do this, but he couldn't not do this. He left home to go to the place of sacrifice. He took with him his son and the wood for the altar and the fire that would ignite that wood. But he also took a broken heart. He didn't still understand how God could do this. And all along the way, Isaac, his son, kept asking him, "Father, here is the fire and here is the wood, but where is the lamb?" Abraham's only reply was, "God will provide." They climbed the mountain, built the altar, put the wood in place, and then Abraham bound his son and laid him on the altar. Abraham was ready to sacrifice his son. Later, clear over in the book of Hebrews, we learn that evidently he expected God to raise him from the dead, but there was no guarantee of that. Abraham was certainly left without understanding. But what he was doing was a pure act of faith that Abraham was carrying through with his obedience to God, all along not understanding what God was doing at the same time. Just as Abraham raised his hand with the knife, ready to kill his son, God stopped him. Abraham had proven his faith in God. Abraham was ready to give what was most precious to him in order to please God. It was then that Abraham turned and saw a ram caught in the thicket. That was the sacrifice. That was what God had provided for Abraham. And that place was named Yahweh Jireh. God will provide. When God asks something of us, He will provide a way for that to be accomplished. We don't understand how that works. We usually don't understand the great big picture. What we do see is God's will set before us, waiting on our obedience. When we are willing to obey, God will provide for us a way for His will to be done. That truly is an amazing promise. In 1 Corinthians 10:13, we're told that God will provide for us a way to escape any temptation that is set before us. In other situations, both in the Scripture and in our own lives, we can see cases when our obedience to God seems maybe almost even impossible, but God provides for us a way not only to be obedient, but to demonstrate our faith in doing so. This isn't just a once upon a time situation. This is a promise that God is still giving to us. Still, we may not understand. We may not see the big picture. We may feel like there is no way to do what God is guiding us to do, but the promise is still there. So, church, this is our calling. Trust God, do His will, watch Him provide.